again. Thanks for checking out the Back to Formula podcast, episode 5. This is again where two longtime friends continue to entertain each other and hopefully others with our movie discussions. My name is Christian, and as always, I'm here with my co-host,
Jordan. Hello, everybody.
And today, we actually decided to take a trip down our recent memory lane and go back and visit the humble beginnings of DC's cinematic universe. Superhero movies, of course, are more prevalent today than ever before, and I, for one, always think it's interesting to go back and see how studios found their footing when they originally started and try to make things work. Now, we're going to be talking about DC today, but first, I actually wanted to start off by asking you, Jordan, how do you personally feel about the DC universe as it stands now as a whole?
Now, before I answer that question, I'm sure that our listeners are judging us for going back in time 9 years ago. With the coronavirus going on, there's not much else to do besides watch older movies and just look back on them. But anyway, to answer your question, what I think about it as a whole now, if you asked me this after I saw Shazam, I would say that the future is looking promising. But after seeing Birds of Prey, I don't know. I have mixed emotions about it. As we know, Batman's going to be coming out next year, I think, June of next year, if I can recall.
Yeah.
And as you and I have been discussing, we've both been feeling very lukewarm about it. And the term lukewarm comes from us not really being excited or really being disappointed with any of the news we've been hearing about it. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. At least me.
And the thing about me is I think a lot of it has to do with how inconsistent the DC universe can be. And yeah. I think that it's really hard to say, oh, this movie was good, so it's going to be good from now on. Oh, this movie was bad, so it's going to be shit from now on. Because it's really been a mix of both, hasn't it?
Yeah, that is true. They, for whatever reason, they really do like to bounce back and forth between different like characters and projects. And this is a good and a bad thing because I can appreciate them trying new shit and, you know, wanting to branch out to different audiences and stuff like that. But it can also be a bad thing, too, because if there's no background or any kind of like, I guess any kind of investment into a story, then what would people really care about? Not only that, it also just doesn't, it just really feels like a lot of their project ideas, they just throw darts at them. Like, to me, like if they follow the same formula like they did for Aquaman and Shazam, yeah, I would love the DC cinematic universe. I think they would be heading into the right direction. But like you said, they're just so inconsistent and all over the place. It makes it hard.
Yeah, it does make it hard. And I can appreciate different takes and trying to get variety in there because other universes, talking about Marvel as well, of course, even though they might have something that's very streamlined and you know what you're going to get every time, I can appreciate a different alternative and trying to find what works with different people. It just kind of makes it hard to feel anticipation or excitement for the next project ahead. And before we continue on with this, just like you said, it's kind of weird going back. I think this is a nice time capsule to just go back and check out some history with some movie studios that are, of course, still relevant today. With the virus we got going on, again, we have nothing to do. But I still think it's something that we can make good of. Just try to see if we can compare how they are now to how they started, because a lot of people don't really know all the details about how it started with DC. They've had a few different attempts at a few different things, and we got some things lined up here.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I mean, really kicking off this DC discussion is really just going to start with an honorable mention with Green Lantern. I remember you telling me the other day, because I actually rewatched this recently. I know that there's a director's cut version of it, which makes the movie, I think, like 20 minutes longer than the hour and 54-minute run. But I remember you telling me that this was supposed to kick off the DC cinematic universe, but because it failed so badly, that they just said, you know, fuck it, and decided to scrap it and not really be a thing, right?
Yeah, that's the thing about it. It's pretty funny because they were banking on this to start it off, and then afterwards they were going to start introducing different DC characters and just bring them into this world. And it's kind of funny because this one was such a disaster, both financially and critically, when they got a movie that wasn't a monster hit or anything, but it actually did decent, Man of Steel, they just decided this worked, let's just roll on out with it. But in a different universe, if this one was a success, we would have started off with a DCEU that started off with Green Lantern starring Ryan Reynolds, which is funny now, obviously in hindsight with how he's been now and, Deadpool, all that stuff, what have you. But with this movie, that's how it was going to start. And it didn't make it, but I'm wondering if you would have been down for this kind of role, because this movie is very different from the DCU that we have now. Maybe not completely now, but if we're comparing it to just Man of Steel, for example, it's not the same kind of movie, like, at all. Would it have worked out for you, or what do you think?
I mean, but that's the thing, is like, it's such a different tonal shift from like Green Lantern versus Man of Steel. And obviously, we're going to touch base on Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman and how they have their own kind of self-contained universe that eventually leads into the cinematic universe that we have now. But just on a tonal level, it's just two completely different sides of the coin. It makes me think, if this movie had been a commercial success, would there ever have been Henry Cavill as Superman? Would we have gotten a Dark Knight Rises? I'm sure we probably would have gotten a Dark Knight Rises still, and they probably would have just finished that and then probably recast somebody else's Batman. Like they did anyway.
Rises was before Green Lantern, wasn't it?
Mm-mm. Green Lantern came out in 2011.
And when did Dark Knight Rises come out? Oh, crap, you're right.
2012. Yeah, 2012. Oh. So I think we still would have gotten the Dark Knight Rises, but I still think that we probably would have had a different Batman that wasn't Ben Affleck further down the road. So it makes you really think about, while we're talking about the actors, before I touch base on like the actual movie, it is funny that two of the characters in Green Lantern are being used in the current cinematic universe now. Mark Strong was Sinestro in Green Lantern, and he's now, who was he? Dr. Savannah and Shazam. And then Abin Sur. What is the guy's name? I know he plays Jango Fett. But now he's Aquaman's dad in the cinematic universe now.
So they can find a way to reuse him again, and also kind of seal the fate that this has nothing to do. It's pretty much been retconned, scrubbed. DC makes fun of this movie now by themselves in small parts here, which is pretty hilarious. And I did also want to touch on really quick. I know some people who do like the movie would have thought it was really cool if it continued on in this universe. Something that's kind of interesting to me is Ryan Reynolds himself. He actually famously hated this movie, and he has admitted in interviews that he had a poor working relationship with this director, and he was actually happy to see it perform poorly, both financially and critically, because he didn't want to come back as Green Lantern ever again. And
oh wow,
yeah, thankfully he found success in Deadpool, right? I mean, he's good at that. And
although Deadpool 1 has not aged that well, in my opinion, but Deadpool 2 still holds up great. But anyway.
Yeah, as it comes to who is playing that role, I'm glad he's finding success there. And for an actor themselves, who pretty much across the board always wants their projects to do well, he was happy about that. So maybe it was just meant to be. Maybe it just wasn't the right number or the right hand that they were dealt with this Green Lantern project. But it's still fascinating to look back at, because there's a lot of complaints on it. And I didn't even know there was a director's cut until recently when you told me. But since you watched it recently, I know there are some things that you've actually come around and you admit that you don't think are as terrible as maybe it's perceived. So I guess we can go ahead and start off with that, about maybe what you like about the movie, what you don't like.
So essentially the movie is about Parallax, which is, I guess, really the main entity of fear. And before I really go into that, I actually really like Green Lantern. I've only read maybe I think one major story, and that was Darkest Night, or Blackest Night, I think is what it's called. But basically, it's about all the Green Lanterns, or I'm sorry, about all the different lanterns, and they have the red lanterns, the orange lanterns, the Sinestro Corps, the blue lanterns. It's a really good story, man, and I think that a lot of the times Green Lanterns is really overlooked as a comic. I think the concept of it is cool, that there's so many different lanterns on the emotional spectrum, and that there's lots of different powers and stuff like that. And I think it's great. You just kind of have to find, the lore goes deep for Green Lantern. And like I said, I've really only read mainly one or two stories, but I enjoy it. I would just love to see it executed on the screen very well. But basically, this movie is about Parallax. The ring goes from Abin Sur to Hal Jordan, which is his successor, because, Abin Sur dies And it's basically about Hal Jordan figuring out how to use the ring, how to use his willpower, and how to become a Green Lantern without really the help of the other Green Lanterns and all that shit. I mean, the graphics are pretty horrible. I mean, I think they're pretty dated. I mean, I watched it on Vudu, and it looked pretty bad, but I'm doing the HBO trial right now. And for whatever reason, the graphics look great on that. I don't know what it is. I don't know, like, what kind of, like, I don't even know, like, the technical word for it, but the graphics look way better on the HBO streaming service than it did on Vudu. That's one thing I'll notice.
I'm wondering if that has something to do with maybe the fact that this was a director's cut, or if it was a certain quality that was showing on Vudu, because I am interested to see that. I always thought they looked bad, but I've never had the movie or watched it on Blu-ray, for example. I'll always, like, stream it from somewhere, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, that was one thing that I noticed right off the bat, is that on the HBOs it looked way better. But I will say that Ryan Reynolds, I think he played a good Hal. I mean, Hal's pretty witty in the comics. I mean, he's kind of like a smart ass here and there. Really, other than that, that was really the only, like, pros that I felt that this movie had. I think it kind of lacked as far as, like, I mean, I don't know. It had a great concept of how, you know, the ring is supposed to work. You know, your constructs are only as powerful as your will. You know, and that I really liked about it. And then, you know, the other thing I wanted to know or see more of was Mark Strong as Sinestro. I think he's got, like, a great facial build that could have worked for him as Sinestro, and seeing him turn into, you know, the Sinestro Corps at the end of the movie or after the credits, which I think would have been really cool to see. But
Probably. I think there's a lot of potential in there. I always kind of thought that I like Ryan Reynolds as an actor. For some reason, whenever I watch Green Lantern, well, when I did, I haven't watched it recently, and I'm not going to pretend like I have, but I just remember feeling like, for some reason, him as this character felt, like, out of place in this universe. Like, he was always never really, like, expecting or was into what was happening next. He comes in, and then he has this thing on his table, and he gets the suit and everything, and he's going along with the motion. It's just kind of weird to me. I feel like he doesn't really understand or really comply with everything that's going on around him throughout the whole movie. Things kind of happen by accident. And I'm wondering if that's just me, but it's just kind of weird, because I think
that is a good point. That is a good point, because, I mean, obviously he stumbles across getting the ring by accident because, you know, he wasn't planning on becoming a Lantern. But, you know, for example, he gets the shit kicked out of him outside of a bar. And then, like, I think he's wearing the ring, and then he ends up using the construct. So he ends up forming a fist and knocks all three guys out. And then it takes them to Oa to learn about who he is as a Lantern and shit like that. So I think that ties back. I think that ties great into what you were saying about shit happening by accident, because that literally happened by accident. And he, like you say, he just goes with the flow.
Yeah, and not that makes a bad character or a bad hero per se. I just think that the way stories are told, sometimes it can get to a point where you feel like, you know, this has happened to me, this is where I am, but I decided that I'm gonna go through with it, and this is what I want to be anyways. And throughout the whole movie, maybe if it continued, it wouldn't feel like that, but I just always got the sense that he was just kind of along for the ride instead of actually moving the story forward, if that makes sense.
Well, there actually is a part where he basically ends up letting, no, not really letting, but there is a part of the movie where someone dies on his watch, like he couldn't save him. And he realizes, oh, maybe I shouldn't be a Green Lantern. And at that point, it was kind of cliche but then after that, you know, he realized, oh, hey, maybe I should just nut up and become a Green Lantern. And he ends up defeating Parallax. And, you know, of course, the whole thing, your constructs are as only strong as your will. You know, he drags it into the pool of the sun, and he basically stays afloat with the constructs of jets, because he was, you know, he's a pilot. So that was one thing that I kind of thought was great, just due to the fact that, you know, he does kind of go through his trials and tribulations of what it means to be a Lantern. I mean, also, Sinestro didn't really help either by making him feel like he was less as a Green Lantern because of the fact that he was human. That was one of the driving points to make him better as a Lantern as well, that I thought was pretty interesting. But like you said, that a lot of it is just him going through the motions more often than not.
Yeah, and that's true. To be fair, I need to see it again. It has been a while, and it's not like everything's bad. That there are some points like that where things start to change. How do you feel about? I know you like Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan. Do you think anyone else could have done a better job?
Not anybody that I can know off the top of my head. And what's so great about Green Lantern is that they can kind of really pick anybody to be a Green Lantern because there's like quite a few humans. Like you got Hal Jordan, you got Jon Stewart, there's Kyle Rayner, Guy Gardner. I mean, those are just four different people right there that you can just pick and choose. There's Simon Baz and Jessica. I think those are like one of the two newer Lanterns, but obviously Hal Jordan is the first, I think, human Green Lantern that they've ever assigned. There was a rumor going around a while ago that people wanted Tom Cruise to be Hal Jordan. And I don't know how to feel about that because, like I said, I can only enjoy Tom Cruise in moderation.
I mean, I love this guy as Ethan Hunt. I don't know about superheroes, to be honest. I think that
I think he's too old.
I think he's too old.
He's too old to be Hal Jordan. Like, I think he's like pushing 60. There's just no way that would work. Like, I think John Hamm would be an awesome Batman. I mean, he's just as tall as him, but would he work as a younger Batman? Unless they CGI'd his face, sure, but I don't see that really happening either. But I don't really have anybody that I think that could play a Hal Jordan. I mean, obviously the guy would have to be white if they're going to be true to the comics. So I just don't really know anybody off the top of my head that could play him.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess that's just one thing that I think about because I know some people when they criticize this movie, they talk about how Ryan Reynolds doesn't really seem right for it. I'm not really sure if I agree or disagree with that.
I'm neutral with that.
That's fair. How about when it comes to the story? I'm not as well versed as Green Lantern as you or probably lots of others. Is there anything you would have changed for this being an origin story, or do you think it kind of treaded that track okay?
I think it tracked over pretty decently as an origin. I mean, I haven't really read too many origin stories of Green Lantern. I think what could have been done much better is instead of having Parallax possess Peter Skarsgård and using him, I think it could have been done a little bit better in that sense or in that token. But that's really the only thing I have for it. That's the kind of the thing with like these space movies is that like not really space movies, but with these space characters is that you kind of have like a very limited scope of what's going to work on screen without having to kind of backtrack and provide too much information to overload audiences' heads.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I'm glad you say that because that's a really good point when it comes to how these movies are perceived. And I know you were saying space movie, even though I wouldn't call it that, you're not far off because a lot of it does have to do with like grander scope going into a whole other society that's not our own, right? So a lot of the criticism that this movie gets is that sometimes people are, I've kind of looked over a few of these just to kind of see if I feel the same way. And there's a lot of the same pattern of thinking where some people feel like it's very jarring and they're lost with what's happening and it goes over things too quickly. And that's kind of where that balance comes in because part of this kind of story is it's fantasy, right? It's supposed to be mystical and things like that. So how do you decide how to balance out what to show them and take the audience along with you and what to let them just kind of figure out is how it works in the universe? Maybe that wasn't done well. Do you feel like you would have had to have known about Green Lantern, or if you knew nothing about him whatsoever, would this movie be enough for you?
The movie would be enough for me. I don't think that the movie was very jarring. Like I could follow the plot like just fine. I didn't have an issue with it. I will say that probably would probably contributed to the fact that it wasn't received as well as it did is because it's got 4 fucking writers on it. Like I just don't understand studios that just like want to have multiple writers on one project. Like I just feel like there's just too many heads and ideas that clash and it's too much of a, all right, well, we'll get this chunk of the story in to satisfy him. And then we'll get this chunk of the story in to satisfy this guy because that's his contribution to it. But if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Like why have this many people on with different ideas?
That's the thing about some studios is, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I do remember watching this video from this guy who works in Hollywood who was explaining the process of how sometimes it gets to a point where you see credits and there's like 4, 5, 6, even apparently like 7 writers on one movie before, and they talk about how sometimes it's just originally one script that's sent in that a studio likes. They like the story and they want to make it into a movie. They feel like to be safe, they want to get writers who've been proven to do good stuff in the past to rewrite their own version of it, and they do that with another guy. You rewrite your version, you rewrite your own version. They all write their own version of this movie, and then in the end, if they've like all of them, they find a guy to combine them all together and give them all credit. And then sometimes when a movie comes out to be jumbled, they wonder why, because there's so many ideas.
It just sounds like a
so many ideas going into one, and that's kind of a situation with Batman versus Superman. But not to get ahead of ourselves there. This. Wait, what?
Actually,
what?
Oh yeah. Well, actually, Batman versus Superman is on our discussion table today, but I think next is Man of Steel.
Next is Man of Steel, which we will touch on, and going with Green Lantern, I don't really have a whole lot to say. I need to see the movie again. It's been too long. I remember not liking it. I remember thinking it was very weak as a movie, but admittedly, it has been a while. I think if I watch the director's cut and there's an added 20 minutes, there'll probably be some things of substance that maybe I'll have different thoughts on. So I will do that soon.
That's on my agenda or my to-do list as well.
Why not? And just to kind of put a stamp in it, I think it'd be neat if we have our own grades on each of these movies as we talk about them. So I'm going to hold mine for now. I will give this one back because I haven't watched it in forever. But for you, out of 10, what would you rate this one?
A solid C+.
C+ out of 10. Yeah, that sounds good.
C+. Well, I can't.
Oh, that's fair. We can grades.
Numbers. Just too many variables in numbers, dude. I'm just gonna stick with
like
letters.
A project someone submitted
C+.
to you.
Yeah, that's solid 72%. Like, it wasn't great, but you didn't do bad either. So that's kind of where I'm at on the scope of.
And you know what? It's not all bad. Ryan Reynolds met his wife Blake Lively on this movie, and they ended up getting married.
That is true. I forgot about that. He was with Scarlett Johansson at that time.
Talk about downgrading.
Pretty funny. Hey, he's got 3 kids with him now.
Living that.
Look at that. Goals.
All right. Well, moving away from Green Lantern, time to go to one of the first in DC's arsenal here. The Man of Steel himself. The Man of Tomorrow. Superman. Now, how about before we start, I'm wondering, Superman, there's a big complaint about him being boring in comics and other media because he's so overpowered. Are you a fan of Superman comics?
Yes. He's so boring, man. Like, this is how I view Superman. He is a humble person. He's a very nice guy. He wants to do what's right and wants to always care for the people who he loves. But he's a boring character. The dude is just way too OP in all of his comics. I mean, there was one, what is it, Superman Prime, where he's practically a god because he basically baked at the Earth's core for numerous years, and he wasn't even like Superman anymore. He was basically this other being, I guess, comparable to Dr. Manhattan, I guess, is what you could, I guess, compare him to because he was sitting in the Earth's core that long. Shit like that just doesn't excite me at all, which is why I like Invincible, and I can talk about Invincible all day. But I think Superman is a very boring character to read. I've tried to read comics by him or about him, and they just don't stick. I do hear that there are great stories of him, like All-Star Superman. Yeah, I think All-Star Superman is about where I think he has like a day or two to live or something like that, and he goes out and does, what Superman does and helps people, consoles them, talks them level to level, like they were.
He's like trying to find a way to make sure everyone's going to be okay when he's gone, and it's apparently like a very heartwarming story. I saw the animated movie version of it, but I haven't read the comic. But from what I heard, it's very faithful, and he's just trying to find a way to make sure everyone's going to be okay when he croaks. And I do like that one. I'm not going to lie, but I haven't really delved into much else.
Does he actually die at the end? Or
no, he does. He croaks.
He
has this disease. That's the whole reason for the story, was because they found out that he contracted this terminal disease from this other planet that he was on, and it was just something with him being a Kryptonian. It was like cancer for him, and there was nothing he could do, and he knew he was going to die, and there was pretty much no way out. So he finds a way to help everyone from this threat before he dies, and then he ends up dying. It was kind of cool. I like it.
Sounds like
it was pretty sad. Like it was one of the ones that Selena, my wife, for you listeners, she put on, and she didn't watch it before, but we watched the animated version, and she was like crying in the end, and I was like, oh shit. But yeah,
I'm more of a Batman guy. Yeah, Superman is just not.
Lucky for you, we get them both in the next one. But anyways, to get away from our to get away from our tangent, we're going to start off with Man of Steel. So there's been a bunch of Superman movies. The original Richard Donner, well, not all him, but he did the first Superman movie. We got the Brandon Routh Superman Returns from Bryan Singer, the pedo, and we also got Zack Snyder with his version. Now, again,
Snyderverse.
Green Lantern was not successful. So here we go. 2 years later, 2013, kind of crazy. We get Zack Snyder's version. Warner Brothers thought he did a good job with Watchmen. I wouldn't disagree with that. And next we get his version of Superman, and we get a whole different reimagining. We get, instead of Wonder Boy, Boy Scout, going around helping everyone, all good, everyone loves him, we get, he's an alien entity. He's a God entity coming around. And how would the world react with someone with that much power who could basically destroy him at any moment? There'd be a lot of paranoia. There'd be a lot of negative attention towards him. So now we get Man of Steel. Now, with that being said, it does start off pretty much as you would expect for any other version of Superman, right? He does come from space as a baby. Parents do take care of him in his whole farmland. So he does start off as a human. Now, I'm wondering, you liked this movie a lot when it came out, and so did I. But ever since then, we kind of reflect on things and see how they age. As a Superman story, does this one fail for you or not? I don't think it does completely.
It doesn't completely, no. The beginning of the movie is great. I think it did a great job of showing him being born and the conflicts of what was going on Krypton. I thought that was really cool. That we got to see his dad and Zod in action before, the planet implodes on itself. I thought that was great. But then, you fast forward to him being on Earth, and, he's working on, a boat. He's getting the crab and stuff like that. And, he has the flashbacks. He saves an oil rig and stuff like that. And I'm okay with it. Like, I didn't have any issues with that at all. And like you said, as these movies have aged, they don't, you realize these little things that just don't really make a whole lot of sense. Like Kevin Costner, over here telling his son, hey, you can't use your powers. People are going to be afraid of you. And that's kind of where, like, the whole movie just kind of takes a spin for itself, I guess. Like, it turns into, like, this, like you said, this paranoia God complex of a film.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense, like, to me. Like, oh, okay, my dad, I can't forgive myself for letting my dad die. My dad said that the world wasn't ready for me, but so I had to listen to him and let him get swooped up by a tornado.
So something about Man of Steel that I completely understand. He's a kid. His dad's over here talking about, I don't want to have you explore this other side of you yet, right? You're too young. You have a lot. You're from somewhere else. It's just going to be too much. The world's not going to be ready for it, which I get. After a certain point, I feel like there's only so long where that can keep going on. It's almost like the whole movie he wanted him to be like that. And I like Kevin Costner and all. There's nothing wrong with him. But as a character, I just feel like it's almost to the point where he felt like he wanted him to go through his whole life just feeling that way, right? Like, don't ever let it out. Don't you ever let it out. It's not ready for you. Don't. And then even to the point where he's being sucked up by a hurricane, or not a hurricane, a tornado. He's being sucked up by a tornado. And he's willing to just let himself die because at the end of the day, it's more important that he doesn't let that part of him out. Even though they're trying to act like he's like a teenager in this scene, but he looks like he's 25, which is really weird.
Yeah, he does. And then I think they have his hair longer just to make it look that way.
Yeah, he just looks way older than he's supposed to be in that part. And I just feel like I get it. I just, at a certain point, it's almost like enough. Like, can we just go on?
It's not believable anymore. Yeah. Not only that, but like when he discovers the ship and realizes that, oh, hey, this is where I'm from. I'm Kryptonian. Even his dad, Jor-El, talks to him like you'll be a god amongst them. Like,
they won't understand.
Where is this coming from? Like, you read a Superman comic, dude. There's no talk about God this, God that. The world's not ready for you. Like, no, he crash landed to Earth. Martha and Jonathan Kent raised him, with what is it, human qualities and human traits. He
Right.
grows up as a human being. He realizes later on, hey, I have these powers. Hey, I'm not from this earth.
I can
But you
help
know
people.
what? I can help people. I'm gonna do good with. I'm gonna do good with people. And his parents encourage him to do that, and that's where you get the Boy Scout personality, the good guy, goody two shoes personality of Superman, because that's how he was raised as a person. And it's not that he, disregards his dad or anything like that. He tells him, hey, we sent you to Earth to have people there because, we wanted you to have a life and, we were dead. And that was it. It wasn't this whole talk about God this, God that. You're going to be looked at as a higher being than people. Like, where is this coming from?
It's just weird. It's so weird because I just feel like it's such an awkward way to look at a character like Superman, because in everything else, just to throw out some examples, you watch like the Justice League animated show, and you see that Superman. He still has all the qualities that you would expect, but I never got the impression that he's like a god amongst humanity. Like, it's just so weird to think of him that
It's
way.
pretentious. It is a very extremely pretentious way of telling a Superman story, and I think it's stupid. I don't think that it's fair to the character or right to the character at all.
And I did want to go back to your point really quick. I also did enjoy, because a lot of the other Superman movies don't really delve too much into Krypton itself. They kind of give you a basic outline, but you don't really see a whole bunch of the deep conflict within and what happened before the explosion. And I did like seeing that in Man of Steel. I'm not gonna lie, I actually did like the beginning. Some people don't like it, and I don't really find that opinion myself. I think it's cool to see exactly how that planet was before he was sent out.
Something different.
It's different, and then when you see some of that tech later in the ship, and you see Russell Crowe again talking as his dad, it still feels like that same old ancient way of how their planet was, and it's cool. But then you start seeing the whole you're going to be a god to them and everything. It just kind of throws you away. It takes you out of like what you're watching, and the rest of the movie's like that, because he was a human born here, and then he's going around and somehow he's acting like he's not a human, like he discovered where he's from. So then his whole character just changes as to he's now this person from that planet, when he never should really feel that way if he was living in here like his whole life. you know?
Yeah, and I mean that proves this point like later on when Zod's about to fuck shit up, and then he tells him, Krypton had his chance. So, I guess that's his way of saying, hey, Krypton's done for.
Yeah,
I
true.
fight for humanity. But like we said, I mean, the whole pretentious storytelling of you're a god amongst men. Like, who has ever looked at Superman this way besides Goyer and fucking Zack Snyder? Like, this is a horrible way of telling it. And I want to get back to talking about the movie in I guess a sequential order, because I know that we talked about. I mean, we pretty much covered like the first half of the movie already.
You know what? We are jumping around. How about this? Just to kind of go back to the beginning, I do like this. I like how, even though it feels like other superhero movies, for example, like Spider-Man or another movie where they're finding out their powers and it makes them feel like weird. He's in the classroom, right? Clark Kent's in this classroom, and he can see people with like X-ray vision. He's having like so much, like his senses are being overloaded with all this information. I do kind of like that, even though I feel like that would have been how he is always when he was little. But with that to the side, that's kind of cool. Do you like that, or what do you feel?
I thought it was pretty all right. I mean, he heats up the doorknob so nobody goes in and touches him or talks to him. So I thought that was pretty cool too.
He saved the bus with
yeah.
the guy who called him a dick splash.
I don't know why you thought that was like funny for like years, but I've always thought that was really stupid.
That's why it's funny, because it's such a stupid insult. Who calls someone a dick splash?
So dumb. Apparently Zack Snyder does. It's probably insults that he uses in his everyday life. Yeah, you fucking dick splash, living in the fucking dream world. Yeah, okay, dude. But anyway, we covered pretty much half of the movie already. I mean, you fast forward to him fighting in the town because Zod finds out who he is and where he's from. And that's basically kind of where like the action kicks off in the movie. I will say one of the pros in this movie is the action.
I would agree.
The fighting is basically what you expect a Superman movie to be, besides like the Richard Donner and, Superman Returns and all that stuff. So I will say that I love the fighting. I do like the visuals. I'm not a fan of, the dark lighting-esque stuff that they have going on. But basically, that whole town scene, that's, the first time that you ever see Kryptonian action. Pause on that. That doesn't really sound right, but you see Kryptonians fighting each other. And after that, Zod takes his L. He goes all the way to the Atlantic Ocean and forms the Terraformer. And basically, it's a race against time with Zod's trying to turn Earth into Krypton again. He's trying to terraform it into Krypton. And I will say before we kind of go towards the end of the film, because we are approaching it, Zod is honestly one of the best parts about the movie. I still think to this day that he is probably the best DC cinematic universe villain that they have or have had in this entire run that they've had going on.
You think so? Out of all of them?
Hell yeah, I do. Look. This dude, Michael Shannon, when you read some of the comics, Zod is a very Kryptonian culture-based man. He lives for his people, he breathes for his people, and that's who he cares about, is Kryptonians. And he had that in the movie. Like, that's what he cared about. He cared about Krypton. Even though they sent him to jail for doing what he did, that's all he cared about at the end of the day was bringing Krypton back. Even though he was in the Phantom Zone for all those years, he still came back and wanted to bring Krypton to its glory. Like, he could have said, oh, fuck Krypton, they jailed me, I don't give a fuck about them, I'll go live somewhere else. But no, he wanted to bring Krypton back. And
it's almost like you appreciate someone with a clear goal and vision, right? No matter what, that's what they want to do.
Right, exactly. And then, I'm not going to dive into this because we're going to touch base on it later, but then you have Lex, who just wants to fuck with Superman and Batman because he feels like it. And then you have Steppenwolf, which is Darkseid's bitch, who did horrible in Justice League. And then who else do we have? I thought Orm was cool. I thought Black Manta was awesome. So those are probably my second and third favorite, but I thought Dr. Sivana was kind of weak. So, I still to this day think that Zod is probably the best villain that they've had.
That's definitely fair. I think comparing it with the other very strong, quote unquote, DC villains. And I did also want to touch on the action really quick before I forget, because you brought up how the action is, and I actually am a fan of it as well too. As much criticism as I have for Snyder, I think he does have a lot of great ideas, and he's a good visionary when it comes to how things look and in an action scene. Because when I think of a Superman fight, I almost would imagine like they start going up in the air and just start fighting in the sky or in space and keep punching each other over and over, right? But that wouldn't be very entertaining. So it becomes it's almost like a bar fight, like a big brawl on the ground. And there just happens to be shit around like buildings and unfortunately innocent people in the way to get hurt. I do feel like I did watch this recently, and I have the Blu-ray of this movie too, so I don't think it was anything with a definition problem. He has this thing where sometimes in intense moments, there's like this weird layer of blur around the models of like the characters, but they're doing like crazy CG throws or like big punches and they fly away. For example, like Henry is fighting, or Henry, Superman, he's fighting the people around, the IHOP area and whatever. And whenever they're throwing punches and stuff and everything's moving kind of quick, it's weird because they seem like they have like this weird blur around them. Like I can't see them clearly, and it's almost like they're trying to hide it around punches and shit. And then like he throws them away, and it's like then you can almost kind of see it when he zooms in. He has this thing where he loves showing someone fly away, and then like while they're flying away, he zooms in so you can see closer, which I think is kind of funny. But it's just a small thing with me.
I noticed that.
I really love to pay attention to action shit like that, and it's something that always stood out to me. Not bad, it's just kind of interesting because I always think it's blurry when I see that. But then moving into what Zod ends up doing, where he wants to turn the entire Earth into Krypton, and it's with this, you called it a terraformer? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's a terraformer, yeah. He's terraforming the planet to become Krypton, and that's why when, Superman was trying to stop it in the Atlantic Ocean,
yeah,
that's why he was getting weak, because the atmosphere was turning into Krypton, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because his only weakness is kryptonite, which is a rock from Krypton, not the atmosphere from Krypton that makes him weak. Yeah. But, I get it. Like, I guess there was enough minerals around in the air to make it I guess, turn into kryptonite, because that's what ends up that's what actually what ends up happening. Now that I think about it, because remember, that's how Batman vs Superman started. Is that they went to the Atlantic Ocean where that terraformer was at,
It was all
and that stuff turned into Krypton,
yeah,
or
all there
kryptonite.
in like a clump.
So yeah, so I mean, in hindsight, that makes sense. But yeah, he stops the terraformer, which to me is one of the best parts of the movie, because he has to actually be Superman and fly through it. Whether or not he feels powerless, he's still got to stop it. And then at that point, well, what ends up happening next day, he gets the rest of Zod's squad banished to the Phantom Zone again, because it causes a ripple into the air. And then it becomes an all-out brawl between him and Zod, right? And that's pretty much like the climax of the movie at that point.
How do you feel about the criticism where he could have tried a bit to try and divert the fight elsewhere, where it's not causing millions of lives, and maybe millions is a stretch, but it's causing a lot of damage in some people's lives, which you end up seeing in BvS, so it's not like, oh, you're just thinking too hard. I kind of feel like there's some merit in that argument. I feel like it's hard to try to really put a fight somewhere when it's just a fight, but I'm wondering what you feel about that.
I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't really his fault that it happened there, because of everything that was going on, aka a messy plot. I mean, from what I remember, there's certain comics, I mean, like Death of Superman, where he fights Doomsday, but it's like in a self-contained city. Like, it doesn't go everywhere, and I don't remember them crashing into buildings and shit like that. But I mean, it is a small nitpick that I have. It's not enough for me to just say fuck the movie. I will say what's enough for me to say that I don't really like this movie anymore, or that it's aged horribly, is the fact that he breaks Zod's neck. Like, okay.
And
like, Superman doesn't really kill people. Like,
well, he doesn't. And it's not the whole fact of breaking his neck at all. I think what happens with me is the setup. I think the setup just leaves so many room for options and so many things for people to be like, why didn't you try this first? Why didn't you try that? If it was something where there was no other way whatsoever, it'd be kind of hard for me to fight that. But there really is so much. They were in an open space. It's just shooting a beam. There's so many things he could have tried that wasn't even attempted. And yeah, it's hindsight 2020, oh, you've never been in a fight against a god like that. Yeah, well, fine. But I just, it's hard to feel like there's not other things that could have been tried first. And the first thing he does is just reach for the neck and crack it, right? It sends a shockwave. And it just,
exactly.
It was, kind of, it was glorified. And yeah, he cries about it afterwards, whatever. I don't know. Something will never really pass where I feel like there could have been other options. But the one thing has to be sure that he did have to stop him, right? Because I wasn't going to stop at anything, and that's pretty much crystal clear from the get-go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just feel like there could have been something where he realized, oh, maybe I can do this and cause a ripple for him to go back into the Phantom Zone or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the thing is that opportunity was passed because that already happened 10, 15 minutes prior to that fight. So at that point, like you said, you had to pick and choose, and it sucks because that's the way it was written. Like, it was basically written to the point where, well, Clark doesn't really have anything else. I'm sorry. Clark doesn't really have any other way to get himself out of this position except for that he has to kill Zod. Like, they didn't write it in a way that made sense to the character to get him out of that situation, because they didn't. It was all, oh, we're gonna make it lead up to this. And yeah, he's gonna kill Zod because that's what Superman does. He kills people.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like there could have been some nice quirky, maybe not quirky is not the right word, but some clever way to find a way to defeat Zod. Even if it's killing or not killing, I don't think it's the really killing part that gets me the most. It's just how abrupt it was done. And we can kind of go about this all day, but it's easy to
like maybe if he indirectly killed him by accident, maybe that could have been written a little bit better. But the fact that he just was like, all right, I gotta snap his neck. That's the part that annoys me the most. Like maybe I don't know. Again, I'm thinking too much into it, but the fact that he's like, because you see it in his face, like, oh, I gotta snap his neck. That's the way it was written. That's the way it was written, and that's not gonna go away from me because that's exactly what happened.
No, it is, and I'm just laughing because I remember the movie. I know exactly what you're talking about when you see his face. He's like, I got to do this, and
he's like, I I have to snap his neck. Ah!
So
Oh man!
I mean, I'll cut this part. All right.
Don't cut it.
So
It's fucking true. That's how the movie was written. It's in his face. He's like, oh, he's not gonna stop him, so I gotta fucking break his neck now. Like, there's no other way to stop him. I don't know how to. I don't know how to
paralyze him.
I have to break his
I
neck.
can't break his arm around him. Break his legs. Anyways, so
Yeah, he could have broke his arm or something, and it could have probably kept him in enough pain to not fucking kill him. I would have been okay with him breaking all his limbs. I would have been totally okay with him breaking all of his limbs instead of him snapping his neck like that. Like, I gotta do it.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't seen this movie in a while, so it's really fun going back into this. Is there there's so many things we can go off of, but just if you can name just a couple things that you would change about this whole movie to make it a little bit stronger to start off this universe, anything you would do, or would you introduce other characters early? For example, like some people say that bringing in hints of other characters to make it feel like it was a universe would have made it a little bit better, or no?
No. They could have totally what they could have did was wrote it better. They could have got rid of the God complex that they had, and they could have not had him kill Zod. And I think that would have made the movie better than what it was or what it is now. That's all they had to do.
I'm still down for the realistic take. I still like the idea of people would probably be scared of him.
Well, we'll see. Here's the thing. They already did a realistic take. They did that with Nolan's Batman.
Yeah.
But see, Nolan's Batman works because it's okay. It's a guy that has a lot of money. Here's a realistic version of how this would look. It's not far-fetched or a pretentious storyline. You know what I mean? Like, Nolan did it great because it was, all right, well, this guy's got a lot of money. He's gonna, travel to a different side of the earth and learn arts and basically bring himself to the peak of physical and mental human perfection. And this is what it would look like in real life. He's going to have the same villains that he would in the comics, but we're going to have a realistic take on it. And it worked, but it doesn't work for Superman. It just doesn't.
Maybe that type of realistic look wouldn't work for Superman. I think there's a way of having Superman keep his character intact, keep his story arcs the same, and also have it you can see a different look from a realistic society today. Just not so over the top with the whole he's an entity complex, like you said. That's my only thing that I think takes it overboard. I think it'd be refreshing to maybe see an audience who's kind of scared of him at first, and until he's able to prove that he's still with them and he's human, but you never see that side. He's more of I'm just going to continue to be this.
I would have been okay if they did not call this movie Superman. If they did not call this movie Superman or made it a Superman movie, I'd be all right with it. But the fact that it's labeled as Superman doesn't sit well.
Technically, you're wrong because it's not called Superman. It's called Man of Steel.
It's Man of Steel. That's right.
So I think we're about done with this one here. But
as far as our rating goes, what would you rate this movie?
So honestly, without any bias, I would give it a 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10. Yeah.
A 6. Okay.
I think that it's not the worst. It's not a 5 out of 5 or 5 out of 10 to me is completely almost meaningless, right? It's not bad, it's not good. It's just there. It's a 6, and it could have been much better. A Superman movie like this needs to be better than that. So that's what I got.
I'd say I'm about the same score as you. 6. Solid D.
Yeah, D. Maybe see me after class, but it's kind of all I got. That's what I got for now with that, and then
moving on to the meat and potatoes.
The meat and potato, legendary. This movie was so hyped, man. I remember when Man of Steel came out, and then a few months later after the release, everything, the dust settled. There was promo for this, and the hype was through the roof. Just a Batman versus Superman movie, and now looking at it in hindsight, and it happened, it's what a waste. Pencil, so man. Bad. How did you mess this up? How did you mess this up?
It's so shit. So hold on, let's
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
backtrack before we dive into the plot. So this movie was called Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. It was supposed to set up the introduction of Justice League, which to me was kind of like once we kind of knew about that, we were kind of like, I don't know how this is going to turn out because they're over here trying to play catch up with Marvel. Because this is the same year that Civil War came
Yeah.
out. Because it was originally supposed to be called, what was it, just Dawn of Justice? But then they changed it to Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. Like when I first watched this movie, like I didn't hate it. I had a back problem when I first saw the movie, so I couldn't really absorb the movie in
Yeah, you were in
theaters
pain. I remember
because
that.
I was just in too much pain. So I went back and saw it a second time, and I thought it was pretty cool. Like, and again, that's that silver screen effect kicking in, right? But then you watch the movie, a couple years later, and it sucks. It's probably like one of the worst superhero movies I've ever
And
seen.
that might be like a simple way to look at it, but that really is how it feels because you go back and watch it and you're like, this is it. This is Batman versus Superman. Like you're thinking about these two iconic characters, and you get this movie, and it was mishandled. Like there's really no way to put it, at least for me. And also, correction, by the way, you kept saying Batman versus Superman. I mean, that's what we call it, but technically it's called Batman v, the letter V, Superman, which I don't really get. I feel like that's kind of weird.
Yeah,
But yeah, and then having it the label Dawn of Justice, I was never a fan of that. I feel like even if you're going to set up a Justice League, that's
me
fine,
neither.
but why do you have to like spoon feed it to everyone who reads it? Why couldn't it just be Batman v Superman? But nitpicks of the title away. What?
So I will say this: The Dark Knight Returns is one of my favorite iterations of
Oh yeah,
Batman. It just to kind of sum it up, it's a story. It's by Frank Miller, and it's a story about Batman who's retired after all these years from being Batman. He's Bruce Wayne for a long time, and time goes on, and he's just like, you know what? I'm sick of being Bruce Wayne, and you go back to being Batman again, and these new threats come up, and he's in his iconic. Was it blue and gray costume, and then he gets his ass kicked, and then he changes his whole logo, his whole personification. He's a more of a rugged, loose cannon
because his
version of
villains are like
Batman.
they're
I
more
guess after
vicious
all
this
these
time around,
years,
right? Like they're more vicious and
yeah, like the mutants. Well, like the mutants, right? So like after all this time, he's not really dealing with criminals like Two-Face anymore or Joker. I mean, yeah, Joker comes back, but he's dealing with people like the mutants. So like they're a lot stronger, they're faster. He's more unhinged. He doesn't really have. He does a lot of indirect
yeah.
killing in this movie, and even in the comic, he only does it like once. But like when Zack Snyder gets a hold of it, he goes like
Well, you give him an inch and he takes a mile.
like yeah, you give him an inch and he takes a mile. Like, and we'll talk about the warehouse scene later on. But literally in the comic, he only does one kind of like indirect or intentional kill, but like that doesn't really happen at all in the rest of the comic or even in the animated movie. But you look at BvS, this dude's like shooting people up. He's having grenades get blown up around people. Like this dude just doesn't give a fuck,
Yeah,
man. Like, like all fucks have just been thrown out of the window at this
exactly.
point.
And it's not even like you and I care about that personally. I know you and I kind of like shit when people don't give a fuck, but it's just weird when it's Batman. Like if this was Punisher or something, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Exactly.
It's weird.
And to
Oh, wait,
me,
what?
yeah, go ahead.
Oh no,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say because this was supposed to be the reboot of this universe, and I'm not the first one to make this criticism, but I would definitely agree that I think it would make more sense to have this iteration of Batman maybe come later in the story, or if you're going to have him in there just as a start, like, oh, okay, you're getting this very extreme, rugged version of Batman instead of the normal Batman that you're used to. If we're going to be led into or have some kind of understanding of how he got this way first, we never really got that, with more of a hint that we might get that later in future movies. And I just think it's weird, and it doesn't really work for people who are pure Batman fans up front to just kind of hope that you get an explanation of that later. And it just doesn't seem. It seems like a very Zack Snyder way of seeing this character, almost like Superman, And I love that interview that's memes where he's like, I perceived it as He's not killing. He's just more. If I shoot this tank that blows up next to that guy, I mean,
and he so
he
happens
shouldn't
to
have been
die.
there. Like,
So
okay, man. Like, all right.
like, all right, dude. And that's the funny thing is like, dude, you've only read one fucking iteration of Batman, which is
Right.
The Dark Knight Returns. Like, this is not a solid interpretation of Batman. And to me, Kevin Conroy will always and forever be the literal 100% accurate, truthful
Same.
version of
I agree.
Batman. The Batman with a code, the Batman that doesn't kill, the Batman
The
that
detective.
gets the job done but does it in the way that he does it and deems it. Yes, the detective Batman. So I'm not going to get into a tangent of it. Let's just dive in. Let's summarize this movie and shit on it like we were planning on doing.
It starts off, you see the aftermath of Man of Steel, and it's so funny because you're watching that, and it's almost like DC was telling Zack Snyder, they're like, hey, man, some people didn't really like how everybody was just getting killed and there was so much destruction. He's like, don't worry about it. I'll write it into this one. So that way I'll say, yeah, you're right, but, this is the consequence. And you see Bruce Wayne seeing this shit. And this is supposed to be motivation because there's so much destruction, killing. To him, it's reckless and it doesn't mean anything. And now this leads him to the opinion that this entity known as Superman needs to be stopped, right? It needs to be destroyed because he killed so much and he even hurt some of his own people in his building. So he looks up and Ben Affleck's very mad and then very sad later. But now, what about this opening scene? I actually think this opening scene kind of works. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing in the movie. I mean, it obviously sets it up for what's going to happen later on. So it makes sense. I mean, for the plot of the movie. And then after that, you see this random person diving into the Atlantic Ocean for kryptonite, right? But like, then comes God, what is it? He's in Africa. Superman's in Africa, and Lois Lane is kidnapped by the terrorists that apparently Lex Luthor sent, but you don't know this at this point in the movie. But basically, the whole plan is that Lex Luthor is trying to frame killings that happened in Africa where Lois Lane was at. And he's basically trying to make him look like a bad guy, like he's just like this unhinged killer. And where Batman fits into all of this is that he's supposed to be this world's greatest detective, but he basically just assumes shit.
It's a lot of assuming.
Like,
a lot of thinking.
Right, it's assumptions. It's a lot of wrong place, wrong time moments, and because he was there, I'm just gonna assume he did it, and he's a bad guy. Like, and that's really what the whole movie is. And to make matters worse, it's not even actually Lex Luthor that Jesse Eisenberg plays as.
Junior,
it's supposed to be his son. Now, I don't know how accurate that's supposed to be. I think that is supposed to be like correct, but it doesn't work. Like, he has like a very odd and twitchy personality throughout the entire movie. And Lex Luthor's supposed to be a very cunning, strategic kind of dude that gets under Superman's skin, and I don't get any of that at all.
Like businessman thinking personality, like it's really weird to see such a spaz try to represent, even if it's not him directly, it's supposed to represent his presence in the movie, and it's just weird. It doesn't match at all.
What? You said the red capes are coming. The red capes are coming.
There's like so much to go on about this one, but I did want to touch on really quick. Can I ask you? You mentioned the beginning. Lois Lane is in Africa, and she ends up being in this situation where people get shot up. There's a conspiracy, what have you. Well, why is Lois Lane there? She's a reporter. Why is she in Africa?
She was there to do a story. I think there was some kind of like war going on out there where she was trying to like cover something. And of course, like I said, this 90% of this movie is based off of wrong place, wrong time. Lex Luthor throws, because he knew Lois Lane was Clark's love interest, he was like, oh, we got to get people down there. Go down there and shoot these people up that Lois Lane is around, but we got to make sure that Superman comes through so that way we can pin it all on him. But the funny thing about it is, like, they shoot these people. Was there not ever an autopsy done to realize that these people were
Superman.
Shot and torched?
Superman shot them all up and set them on fire.
It was Superman. He burned them. He set them on fire. Like, it doesn't even make any sense. Like, that's what the whole movie is about, and it's not good. I know I sound very biased saying all this, but like, It's just not a very good plot.
It's coming from a fan
messy.
too, because I know you were excited for this movie, as was I. You saw it, and at first, same with me. Silver screen effect, man. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was cool. I was a little upset that it was called Batman versus Superman, and during the whole movie, you get a total of 8 minutes of Batman versus Superman, which I think is a real fucking letdown. And other than that, I didn't really have much to say about it. But the thing is, you sit on it, you wait, you come back to it, and you just start asking so many questions. You see all these criticisms, and you don't think about them, and you're like, wait, let me go back. And you watch it, and you're like, wait, how did he think that? How does that make sense? Like, it doesn't. There's so many things in there that's just like assumptions. It's like the characters in this movie know that they're in a movie, and they have to go to this spot in this space to make sure that this happens. And it's like that. It's pretty much like that throughout the whole 2 hours and 2.5 hours in the Ultimate Edition.
2 hours and 30 minutes. No, the Ultimate Edition was 3 hours, but yeah, the theatrical cut. I mean, the extended cut doesn't make it any better. Like, if anything, it makes you more mad because they show more stupid shit happening. Like, it doesn't make it any better. To me, it makes it worse, if I'm being honest. But I was just saying, like, not only that, but it's just that Batman is supposed to be the world's greatest detective. And he's so shit as a detective in this movie that he couldn't realize that Lex Luthor was jerking him off.
Lex Luthor is jerking him off, and Superman this whole movie, and Batman does not figure it out. Lois Lane figures it out for some reason. Batman does.
Yes. Yes. Right. The world's greatest detective can't even piece that together. He can't even piece together, Lex Luthor's sending in fake letters to make it seem like I don't care about my employees. Fuck Superman. He did this. Like, why would Batman give a shit? Like,
I'm sorry.
It just doesn't make any fucking sense.
It's like a
dude.
rabbit hole, man. You start getting into one and you get into the others, and
dude, that is my exact problem with this movie, man. There's just too many fucking questions. It's too much of why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? Where did he get this from? Why is he thinking that this time? And the whole movie, the only two people with fucking logic and sense in this movie is fucking Alfred and Lois Lane. Even Alfred's like, hey man, maybe you should chill on, hating Superman so much. Like, what is your issue? And Batman's like, no, there's a 1% chance that he's a bad man. I have to take that 1% chance. Based off of what?
Off a dream he had that maybe Flash sent him? Oh, he's going to take over the world. So this dream means I have to do something now.
And there's so many fucking people who defend the movie that are like, it's not an assumption. He got letters. The people are upset because Superman hurt them.
It was all done by Lex Luthor. He was manipulated. But why? I just feel like Batman is better than that. I'm thinking of the Kevin Conroy Batman.
Kevin Conroy.
We're talking about him. I'm thinking about Kevin Conroy Batman. I just don't see that happening. I see him being smarter and piecing shit together and finding out what's going on. And we don't get any of that shit. It's just more Batman upset the whole movie and chasing Superman around because he's very mad at him.
Right. And I get it. He's mad. He's upset. But like, why wouldn't he? I feel like Batman would actually go and talk to Superman before he just wages an all-out war on him. And like, yeah. But like, what was that other part of the fucking movie where after he steals the kryptonite and he runs into Superman, the bat is dead, bury him. I forgot, man. Don't even get me started on Superman in this movie, because Superman is just a dark and brooding, depressing character in this movie. All he does is just sulk and fly around the whole goddamn movie. Like, and I guess the way that he feels is warranted because everyone is afraid of him. And he doesn't know why people are afraid of him. So, I mean, it's not like he snapped somebody's neck in the previous movie. That could be a reason why they're afraid of him. But
and but really quick, I did want to touch on that because I thought it was hilarious. I've seen I remember watching a video about this movie, and it was all mostly a joke, just making fun of this movie and the fact how they were talking about how Batman and Superman could have probably worked out this conflict like over a cup of coffee or something. But even with that being said, I feel like, even though I think that Batman is stupid for having all these assumptions and he's pretty much making a reason to want to kill Superman, I don't really find a reason for Superman to really give a shit or want to kill Batman. Like, what, people are scared of him? They keep talking about the Bat of Gotham because they're so afraid to say Batman. They just say the Bat of Gotham. Like, yeah, same with Superman. Like, you just never want to say it because Zack Snyder's like
Yeah, that's right. That's right, dude. At the beginning of the movie, he's all upset because Batman treats criminals harshly.
He
Like,
wouldn't.
why the fuck
He
would he
wouldn't,
care?
dude.
He's
That's
in
where
Metropolis.
people are tricked into thinking that
Exactly.
Superman has a reason to want to kill Batman, but he doesn't. They're so reaching. They're reaching so hard. Like I don't understand
Oh, he got the bat, and that's the other thing that I thought
how
was
he brands
stupid as hell
people.
in this movie too. Fucking he branded people, so now he has to die in prison. People need to kill him. Oh, he got the bat brand. Come on, again, Batman doesn't do
Brand
shit like
people.
that. Like, what
The
are you
fuck?
talking about? He brands people. Okay. And not only that, dude, but let's talk about Wonder
Do we
Woman
have?
in this movie. And this is something that gets brought up in Justice League, but like she loves to act like she's a saint in this movie. She steals Lex's information because he took a picture of her old boyfriend back in World War II. And she knows that all this shit is happening and Man of Steel and all that stuff. And yeah, I guess it's Superman's problem at the end of the day and not really anybody else's. But, she goes into hiding. And then, like, later on, she finally decides to come out of hiding and help. Like, again, it's just selective. Like, I think we're going to go ahead and make the story flow more. So let's just go ahead and throw Wonder Woman in there. Like, what
And
sense does that even
it's
make?
funny to me because I think as someone who knows about superhero lore and obviously knows who Wonder Woman is, it's easy for us to piece together like, oh, that's her, Wonder Woman, it's DC characters. But if we just take that all away and take it as a movie by itself, and you find out like how she's incorporated in this and how she shows up in the end, like pretend that this was a whole new line of characters made by a random ass studio. None of these characters existed. And you watch a movie like this and you're like, okay, this lady comes in and talks to this person a couple times and then boom, she shows up at the end. Like, who is this bitch? And why should we care about her? Like, I don't understand how this like is really relevant. It's to me, it's so thrown in there. And I feel like if you were going to throw in her there, or if you're going to throw her in there, fine. But I think there could have been a more organic way to do it. I think she could have had something more to do than find out where's this information that Lex has. It's also funny, by the way, because when she pulls it up on her laptop, all these Justice League members already have logos. They already have like colors and shit, which is funny. But
Yeah, because that's the way Lex put it up in there. Yeah, it's so dumb. Not only that, but Doomsday is pretty horrible in this movie too. Like, I don't know why Doomsday towers over Superman in this movie. That was another thing that bothered me. He also didn't have his spikes. Yeah, he's normally like the same height as Superman. I don't even understand why he's like fucking gargantuan almost in this movie. But I mean, he also towers over Superman. The stupid energy blast that he has in the movie too don't make any sense. Like, okay, like, yeah, I get Zod's body, but like, how does that even work? I will say, like, I mean, even the fight between Batman and Superman, I don't even think it was that great either. The only positives behind it was the arrow that he shot that had Krypton in it, or kryptonite in it, because that happened in the comics. So that was cool. But Superman coming to him, Bruce, please, you have to listen. We have to fight each other, but let's not fight each other. Let's go and confront Lex and tell him, what he is as a person and that it's not going to work. Like that was literally him pleading to Bruce before he kicked his ass and screamed, Martha, save Martha. And then, oh no, Superman's mother has the same name as mine. I have to go save his mom now. And I realized, and people try to say, oh, it's deeper than him just saying Martha. He realized that Superman has a mom too.
This alien being that he hates, he was set to destroy, is actually brought down to human level by having a human mother. It's like, do we get it? We're not saying that we don't understand it. We're saying it's stupid. How dumb are you? God damn.
Such a shit reason to just stop fighting. Oh my god, you have a mom? Wow, maybe you do have some kind of humanity after all. Like,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then of course Lois Lane has to come in there and save him again because she's the only one. She's the only one with a fucking brain in the movie. Her and fucking Alfred, and the whole goddamn movie. Those are the only two people who fucking think. The only pros that this movie gets from me is the warehouse,
which is legendary. I'm not gonna lie. The warehouse scene seems like something out of the Arkham games if it was done in live action. If we if we got like a series, even like a web series with this kind of budget, with like Batman doing shit like that, and not just fighting, obviously, but like this kind of interpretation, and he's just not being stupid the whole movie, I would have loved it because I think the warehouse scene is great. I think Affleck looks great in the suit. He's good in the action. He's a good Batman. It's not his fault, man, and it fucking sucks that now we're pretty much gone of him completely as this role.
You know, that you mentioned that Ben Affleck was actually really, I think he was actually very, what's the word I'm looking for, passionate about Batman. I do remember seeing some articles where he really wanted to, because remember we were supposed to get Deathstroke. It was supposed to be a really detective-driven based movie about him and Deathstroke, written and directed by Ben Affleck, but we never got it because of whatever reason we never got it. I'm sure for WB reasons. But that was basically what it was supposed to be about. And it was supposed to be about his younger days, very detective driven, very action driven about, what was going on between him and Slade. And of course it just didn't happen. And like you said, it sucks that the movie did as bad as it did. Because now he just, I already know that he's refusing to pay any kind of superhero.
Yeah, he's pretty much done. I know I already talked to you about this, but he became very disenchanted with superhero movies after Daredevil. He thought he was embarrassed after it, and it didn't turn out the way he was hoping. And then when Batman came around, he kind of saw it as like a second chance, and he was reluctant at first, decided to go through with it because he loved the character. And he also talks about how he was talking with Zack Snyder, and he loved the fact that he wanted to adapt Frank Miller's Dark Knight Rises. Dark Knight Returns. And there's so many Dark Knight does this. Dark Knight takes a shit. But anyways, so he was happy. He was passionate about it, man. I totally believe that. I don't think this is really his fault at all, and it sucks because now he's pretty much done. I think he's just gonna focus on non-superhero roles. But with that being said, it is a shame, and I think just man, I don't even know. Is it someone else directing? Is it a whole different story? I don't think The Dark Knight Returns is a bad story to do this over. I just think that maybe down the line, or they could have maybe done a Batman movie first. Yeah, just establish him first.
It's too soon. That's the problem. It's too soon, man. Like, the dude had to have gone through Jason Todd. There's a lot of different things that have happened. Barbara Gordon becoming paralyzed. There had to have been plenty of different things to happen to get him to.
It's almost like you're watching a movie where there was Batman. A whole bunch of movies before that we just missed, and then now we're watching this.
Exactly. Like if we had like maybe one or two solo movies of Batman before Man of Steel came out, and then we had, let's just say, BvS come out, then it would maybe make sense as to why he was acting like it. But then again, that's just justifying shitty writing.
No, at the end of the day, we have to judge it on what we have, and it really is just covering shitty writing. And
and I mean, with that being said, I mean, there's not really much else to say about this movie. I mean, Superman dies, and at the very end of the movie, men still are good because Superman died for us. So, and that leads into Justice League, which we'll talk about at a later date. But overall, I mean, the movie gets a solid F, an F plus.
I thought you were going to give it like a D minus or something.
Nah, I guess an F plus. The reason why I give it an F plus is because of the warehouse scene. Everything other than that, under the scope, exactly what it is that we talked about. And the funny thing is that we've been rambling on about this movie for a while, and I still haven't covered everything that I.
Yeah, there's really we could do a whole like 4-hour episode probably on just this movie.
I could talk about this movie all fucking day and why I don't like it. And I know I sound really biased, just shitting on this movie, but I'm honest. Like, this is how I feel about the movie. Like I said, I revisited it, and I do not like it. It does not hold
sorry.
up.
I was just going to say, if it sounds biased, I would disagree, because if it was biased to me, it would be like, you saw this, you loved it, and you never take any kind of relook at it again. And you did like this movie when it came out. So if anything, I would say that it's just taking an honest look at it after some time.
Well, it's just like, and before people think that I'm just an MCU shill, I think that there's kind of bad MCU films too. Like, I don't think Age of Ultron is aged well at all. I think it's
I don't like Age of Ultron, dude.
All of them. Especially the Hulk and Black Widow shit. Like, that is just so forced. I'm glad it didn't go anywhere with it, but that was just so shit. Like, it's just bad. Like, the first Thor is boring as hell. It's a snooze fest. Um, I mean, yeah, again, I'm not an MCU shill. I'm not a fanboy. I like movies and just shit I take it as what it is, and if it's good and I like something from it, I'll admit that I like something from it. But if it's
You're
not
not gonna
good, I'm just
pretend.
gonna shit on it. Like, that sounds very. I'm just not gonna pretend to like it because life is too short for me to pretend that I like something when I really don't.
I can dig
So
it. And with
there's
me,
that.
um, I'm trying to be honest here. I mean, I don't want to just say that it's the worst thing ever. If I had to give it, let's say out of 10, I'd probably about a 3. And that might be harsh, but that really is how I feel, man. I never want to come back to this movie, and whenever I watch it, it's not what.
Dude, the movie, it makes me angry to watch. I get pissed off watching this movie, man. The only time I revisit this movie is for the warehouse scene. I cannot watch this
Yeah,
movie from
because I
beginning
have
to
to be
end. I
honest, it's
just
not just
can't.
about, oh, was this done well? Was this done well? How's the writing? It's like, how does it entertain me? And overall, dude, it's not that entertaining. Like the action in it, I like, but there's not a whole lot of it. And sorry, to me, it's a big thing when you advertise a whole movie as this fight, and the fight is literally like less than 5% of the movie. Like, what the hell? I don't understand.
Batman versus Superman, more like Batman and Superman take assumptions from one another, from a leaked from an unknown source, while the reporter has to
Or like
figure it out.
Batman has
What the movie should have
Superman-size
been fucking
assumptions and
called.
misunderstandings, while Superman is just an idiot, doesn't know what to do.
Well, Superman is a brooding clown who's depressed all the time and is fake mad and fake woke about issues going on in Gotham that has nothing to do with him. Okay. I mean, at least Batman had a reason to be mad. I mean, his employees were infected. Or affected. What is wrong with me? All this coronavirus talk. His employees were affected by the fight that Superman was in.
He
Why would
wouldn't.
Superman care about Batman? Like, it just, he wouldn't. It doesn't make sense. It's a reach.
You've been tricked,
But I'm
ladies
done
and
talking
gentlemen.
about this because
You've
I'm
been
getting
tricked
mad.
into thinking that
Um,
Superman has a reason to hate Batman. He doesn't. You're wrong. All right. You know what?
Batman has every reason to hate Superman, but why would Superman hate Batman? It just doesn't fucking make sense. But anyway, that wraps up our DC discussion. We're gonna try and tackle maybe 2 to 3, kind of going forward until we get to the current DC movies, and kind of just go from there. Then we're at that point now in our episode where we talk about some housekeeping items, I guess. To be fair, there's not a whole lot
It'll
going
probably
on because of all the bullshit going around. But I did rent, yeah, so it'll be very quick. I did rent Underwater. I watched it twice. I know that you watched it on my account, and we were just gonna talk about that briefly. You were telling me that January releases don't get a whole lot of love because they're expected to be bad.
Yeah,
Um,
January is
so
notorious for
yeah,
being what studios call a dump month. And that's not just something I'm making up. You can actually look online and do research and find some examples of how certain movies were slated to be bigger releases. And then when studios take a look at the products themselves, they don't have faith in them, or they feel like something's going to happen where it's not going to perform, what have you. And what they'll do is instead of releasing them on their certain date, they'll move up other releases to move up higher that they think will do better. And the movies that they think will not do good, they push them to January because it's been proven January is the release month where studios will have the least amount of loss for money because they can put up their movies that don't have that big budget or won't do well, and people don't see movies that much in January because in December they see a lot and then they take a break. Yeah. So it is true.
post-holiday.
For example, just to kind of throw something out there, Replicas with Keanu Reeves, that wasn't supposed to be a January release, but it was, and it ended up being terrible. And then people were like, okay, that makes sense. And Underwater ended up being a January release. So that kind of thought, to me, I thought that it was going to be one of those movies that's very, very bad, and they just don't know what to do with it. And I saw the trailer. Didn't really sell me on it, but I am actually pleasantly surprised with it. So I'm glad we're going to talk about it here. And I'm wondering what made you interested in this, because I don't really like Kristen Stewart a whole lot. She's okay, but I know you like the trailer, and I know you like these kinds of movies. So is it
I don't
almost the
either.
creature feature that intrigued you?
Yeah, it's just more of like the deep sea aspect of it, along with the creature concept behind it too. I kind of look at it as an underwater version of Life. If you guys have ever seen Life, it's got Rebecca Ferguson, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Ryan Reynolds in, and they basically come across this specimen that they analyze from Mars. And spoiler alert, but Ryan Reynolds dies a very horrible death in that movie. Fun fact: he dies early for scheduling conflicts. He was apparently supposed to be alive longer in the movie, but they let him die earlier because he had to go film another movie. But I won't go into how he
To be
dies.
honest, it's kind of sad because he died in the movie because he also died in real life as well. That other movie didn't work out and he died. So rip Ryan Reynolds.
Hey, chill. Anyway. But yeah, I mean, underwater. I mean, that's
yeah. It's like
we're talking about
we should
Ryan
name
Reynolds
this like fucking a Ryan Reynolds episode. But before we talk about underwater, how about you give us a synopsis of what it's about, what it's going for?
Well, I mean, basically, it's got Kristen. I can't close my mouth, Stewart. Basically, she's part of an underwater drill team. Randomly, shit starts happening where I guess, drill station underwater starts kind of converging in and fucking up on itself. And they realize that they are not alone underwater and they are trying to basically escape to the surface. And that's pretty much the best way that I can describe the movie. Are they in the
Mariana Trench or no?
Spoiling too much. No, I think they're like in some kind of major ocean, but they're like at the bottom of like the actual ocean. Like it's like pretty much at like floor level. Because remember they were walking at the bottom of the sea. Remember they had to like walk to certain areas and they were like on the actual ground. So yeah,
this movie I thought was very interesting because it almost seems to follow Kristen Stewart from the beginning, and you do get a sense of later who is a part of this crew, but it doesn't start that way really. You get a monologue with Kristen Stewart, and then all of a sudden it jumps right into the action, which I kind of appreciate. To me, it's kind of annoying when movies like this, for example, Creature Features, not all sci-fi, like I'm not a moron, I do like shit that happens to delve into what's going on, but I did actually appreciate how things starts kicking off right off the bat, and you see how she has to close the gate for certain situations that are upcoming with other people running in, and do you think it kind of gripped you from the beginning, or what were you expecting out of this movie?
I mean, I can appreciate shit popping off early. I mean, my wife had the nerve to say that
too fast.
Stuff was happening too fast. Like, what do you mean it's happening too fast? It's an hour. I'm like, it's a 90-minute movie. Like, we got to get the ball rolling. Like, we don't have time to dwell. Like, I like the fact that it had stuff happening within the first 5 to 8 minutes of the movie, and then it slowed down.
It does slow down,
and then picked back up. I like that because you're able, because you're able to be like, oh shit, like this is what's going on, and now this is what they have to do to get out of their current situation, and I like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to
do my best. This movie's relatively new to not spoil or a whole lot, or if I need to spoil, I'll try to be very minimal about it. But I think that Kristen Stewart actually does a good job here, and I don't mean to act like she's a terrible actress and everything, because she's not. I'm not one of those people who are like, oh, she's in Twilight, because whatever, it's just one fucking movie series. But as this, I kind of did buy her. I think by the look change, my wife thought it was kind of funny how she looked like a dude, and she had her hair white and whatever, and kind of like Zaz style. But I kind of did buy it. I thought that she was someone who would have that kind of appearance, and the way she was talking, she seemed like she knew what she was talking about. And what I appreciated about this movie is a lot of the beginning has to do with, obviously they want to try to find out how to get out of there, but they acknowledge that since they're underwater, it's not so easy of like, oh, go out and call for help, or oh, call this person and have them help us. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Yeah.
That is a good point, dude. That is one thing that I like about it, because like you said, it wasn't as easy as saying, hey, we're stuck down here, get us some help. Like, no, we're pretty much on our own, and if we want to get out of here, we actually have to try. And they had to trek to different substations that they had to go to. They had to work their way around.
They have to find their way to make shit happen. And sometimes it's not always going to be easy. Well, not any time is it easy, but they all acknowledge that it's dangerous and they might not have an easy chance of getting back, but that's what has to be done if they want to make it out alive. And I actually did grow to like a lot of the cast. I like a lot of the people who are around. I think one of them, I could be wrong, and I might end up cutting this if I am, but do you know if that guy who has the beard, he's the dude from 10 Cloverfield Lane, or also Hush, John Gallagher Jr.? You know that guy or no? No?
I don't think
That
I've
guy who
seen
gets shot in the
Hush.
face by John
The 10
Goodman?
Cloverfield Lane.
Is he French? Maybe.
Talking about the
Maybe.
French
I'm going off on
fucker?
it. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, no, you're talking to... No, okay, so at first I thought you were talking about the French captain, but I know exactly who you're talking about. You're talking about the guy that was in there with John Goodman. John, I can't
And
stop eating Goodman.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead,
And
yeah.
Mary Winstead.
That's him, right?
Yeah, dude, I think he was in Underwater.
Yeah.
Because I think that might have been him with a beard. That is him.
He's not in. Yeah,
That-
okay,
that-
I thought
that is
so.
him.
He's
I
not
just
in a
looked it
whole
up.
lot, and I thought that was him, but I wasn't 100%. But I don't know, man. It might just be me. I like that guy as an actor. I always thought he was like really good, and I think he's kind of funny in a lot of shit. And he was really good at that. TJ Miller is in it,
Fucking
where we get a
TJ
lot
Miller.
of very close ass shots and chest shots, which I very thoroughly appreciate. Hey, maybe it's not fake. Maybe he has
That
that. You
fake
don't know.
tattoo.
You haven't seen him shirtless.
Bro, that tattoo looks really fake,
So
man.
what I
don't
was
think
trying to
that's
get at here is I do like the crew involved. I think the captain's a good captain, and there's like a scared bitch in there. There's T.J. Miller trying to be the funny guy. There's just other people who are just doing their shit. There's a black guy in there who dies first, as always, because it's a fucking horror movie. And so I don't want to give a whole lot away, but it's kind of hard to talk about this movie because it's a very simple concept. There's not a whole lot that's really complicated about it, but I think it looks well. It's a movie that seems like it has a high budget, and for being underwater, you kind of have to make sure that everything looks good, because if something looks fake underwater, it just looks really fake and phony, right? Like, it's going to be hard to enjoy that if you're constantly being taken out of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that was one thing that Aquaman did very well, was, with their water and stuff. But yeah, they had a lot of cool, like, slow motion shots like that. I really love in the movie how they showed the explosions
That
being
was
done
cool,
underwater.
I have to admit.
I thought that was like one of my favorite parts.
Explosions underwater, I think, is kind of interesting the way that they're shot or represented, and that was a really cool way to do it. I could tell that there was like a good mix of like practical shit in here and CG, so that helped a lot with the illusion. And when it comes to just trying to have them escape, it leads into one thing going into another, and they stumble across, let's just say, some other beings that people haven't really been able to discover yet from being so low underwater, and hence the title of the movie itself. It did remind me, I can't really get away from this, and just by the concept itself, you might think it reminds me of Alien, things like that. It is kind of like an Alien movie. It is kind of like a life underwater, and that's not really done in a special way. I think it's very standard. Everything's kind of basic, and not in a bad way. It's just that for me personally, things happen the way that I expect them to, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it is done well, and I feel like it does stand on its own for being just that type of movie. But I do feel like if it did something special or did something crazy different, it could have been maybe something that people think about more and be like, oh, that movie underwater, it could have maybe had a bigger status with its name, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really didn't think. Well, actually, some of the parts were pretty predictable, but like you said, it's not always a bad thing. So, but yeah, I mean, the movie for me, it gets a solid 7 out of 10. Like, it was good, like you said, like, it's a good movie. Nothing groundbreaking.
Yeah, that's the thing. Nothing
different.
groundbreaking,
Like,
and not everything has to be groundbreaking. That's the point about it. Is I think that some people they feel like when they watch a movie,
Right.
it has to blow their mind or else it's bad, and I think that's kind of silly. Like, there's really no point of that. So, yeah. So if I'm just being real with myself, how do I feel about it? What was made? It was entertaining. It's a good movie. It's decent. I thought it was going to be much worse for a January release. I feel like it actually should have been released whenever it was planned to be. I think it was kind of wasted for that. But with that, I would give this a solid. You know what? I would be honest. I would give it a good 7 out of 10. I probably would watch this again if anyone else wanted to watch it, because there are definitely worse movies out there. So
like
Let's just have
BvS. But
a whole special
right.
episode where it's just shitting on BvS for 5 hours.
Yeah. What I'll do is that I'll document everything that I see every 20 minutes of the movie, or every 30 minutes, and then I'll just shit on that. So that way we have a whole
and we'll have a video
episode
dedicated where we watch
to
it and just like
BvS.
shit on every little thing.
I'm kidding, that's me. Yeah, and then we'll also retcon everything that happens in it too, because Zack Snyder is that dude who loves to retcon his own movies. But anyway, moving on, that pretty much wraps up our episode. I know that we've kind of gone on for a little while, but that's pretty much all we have. As we're recording this, it's 1:48 in the morning, Sunday, April 19th. We're really hoping that maybe our state and country itself will reopen things up in the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping to see Spiral when it comes out. Hopefully, obviously, not at the expense of other people being infected or being impacted by this thing. Unfortunately, if that movie ends up getting delayed or straight to home release because of this, I'll end up buying it because I'm genuinely curious to see how this movie will play out. But I am hoping to Chris Rock. But yeah, the Spiral. Yeah, it basically, it was funny because we talked about this on a previous episode, but it was like the second one that we did. And almost a year ago, he had announced that he was getting into the rights for Saw and kind of wanted to bring it back. And here we are. He's getting ready to come out with it. So I'm curious to see what.
I'm curious who sits at home who has this kind of money, I guess, or connections to do this. And they're like, you know what I want to bring back? Saw. That's what I want to bring back.
Dude, yes, that's the funniest shit ever that you say it that way.
Right.
Because the dude is definitely rolling in dough. I mean, I don't think he's been in anything recently as of late, but he's definitely got enough money going around where he can just say, hey guys, I know we made I know you guys made like 8 movies of this shit 5-6 years ago, but I actually kind of want to bring it back and, put myself in it and do my own thing with it. What do you guys think? And because the studio wants money and knows that people will flock to see it, they give him the green light to do it.
So. And I also did want to say to anyone who's at this point right now, do appreciate you listening to us ramble. This definitely has been a very rambly episode and just kind of shooting the shit. Again, not a whole lot to talk about. We like to talk about recent stuff, but there's a pandemic going on. And with that, we're trying to make the best of it. So hopefully new stuff will come out soon. There are signs that things will return back to normal, and that will make this much easier. But either way, still very much appreciated. Again, we're just doing this for fun, but it's always cool to think that maybe we're providing some kind of entertainment. You got anything else on your mind before we close this out?
No, anybody that does listen to us, you guys are definitely appreciated. And, hopefully in the info box, we can have something where you guys can write in and give us topics. I mean, I'm pretty much, this the whole point of this podcast is a hobby and it's to talk about neuroculture. But, we also dabble in other aspects of life too. So yeah, I mean, it's always good to have.
I would
variety.
Agree. If you think
that's really
anyone would find interest in this, definitely give us a share. Again, we're available on YouTube, all podcast services, and we will keep this up every 2 weeks. Come up with something else. We appreciate your patronage, and shoot us an email. I will leave our information below if you're interested, and we'll definitely be happy to consider talking about anything that's brought up. All right, then. Well, again, today's Sunday.
Yeah,
he already said the date. I'm too lazy to check. Thanks for listening. This was episode 5, and bye. All right, save it.
We outie. Bye.
And